What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over some underrated loot spots in Fortnite OG. As always, if you guys do find this video helpful, informative, interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below where your favorite place to land has been on the Chapter 1 map. So before we get into the spots, just to talk about the loot this season, the spawn rate of a lot of things just sucks. It feels like the chest spawn rate was much better in past seasons. The floor loot spawn rate was much better. And this really impacts the spots that you can land at because, like last season, for example, there was that little RV park and gas station on the outskirts of Frenzy. You could land there and like make that work. Whereas like if that spot had this season's loot spawn rate, you would get like one chest and a gun and then like hope for the best. So like it is much harder to get decent loot this season. I've had people ask me like, where are people getting gold guns? It's just either luck or supply drops. The supply drops do give high rarity loot. So if you're like desperate for high rarity loot, go for the supply drops. And with the naturally occurring rifts, you can kind of pair those things like, okay, I see a drop spawn, I'm going to go to this rift and then I'm going to go get that drop. So just keep in mind, it's not like you need to land anywhere special to get, you know, decent loot. It's just that the spawn rate of everything is kind of crap. So you have to land at a spot with a decent amount of loot to kind of make it work, or third party other areas. You can't just land at like 2 houses and then that be your loot for the game. Whereas like last season, you kind of could make that work. That is one of the kind of improvements Fortnite has made to the map design over the years, is just like the loot density or the loot spawn rate, I guess. Even Chapter 2, there was a lot more kind of like low key spots that you could make work. But the first spot we're going to get into is going to be Yonder Yard. This spot has 18 potential chest spawns and 47 potential floor loot spawns. It's a few like factory buildings on the outskirts of Flush Factory, and it can be looted pretty quick. And like a lot of the spots, I think every spot I'm going to talk about in this video, there is a rift on a nearby hill that can be used for rotation to get to zone, or to go to a different area to get more loot, or to third party a fight and get more loot. That's something you need to kind of keep in mind, like I touched on, is you're not just going to loot 1 or 2 things and then be good for the game. You need to kind of loot your spot. And then if you have good loot from that, that's awesome. But like oftentimes you're not going to, you're going to need to go somewhere else to get more loot, or go to where people are fighting to kind of clean that up and get their loot. That's kind of the mindset you need to have. If you play builds at all, there is like a lot of pallets at this spot for easy mats, which is really nice. And when I was like grinding the solo leaderboards in Chapter 1, this was a spot I landed at a lot. I really like Yonder Yard. It's just a really good spot. So I would recommend landing here if you're looking for a spot with decent amount of loot. And a little more low key than some of the more like hot spots like Retail Row, Tilted, Paradise, Pleasant, things like that. Another good spot, this probably isn't going to be that uncontested, is going to be Westworld. There's 18 potential chest spawns here and 44 potential floor loot spawns. There also is a rift to leave. It's like a little village on the edge of the desert biome, and it has a solid amount of loot, but unlike some of the other spots I'm going to talk about in this video, it's a bunch of small buildings dispersed around, so it does take a while to loot this location, and that was kind of problematic back on the day because it was on the edge of the map, and taking a while to loot could be like really problematic if zone pulled far. But with the natural rift here, the zone really shouldn't be a problem at all. And this is actually where Tfue landed for one of the weeks where he qualified for the World Cup finals. I think he like won that week from Westworld. So it's like clearly a good spot. I think at this point in time, it's probably going to be more contested than it's worth. I could be wrong, but this is like one of those spots that like sometimes there's low key spots that have such a reputation that they're too contested. And I feel like this might be one of them. But overall, it could be a decent spot to land. Like I said, you have a rift. You can kind of rift to Paradise. You can go to Fatal, anywhere you want. And then learning where these rifts are is huge, because then you can rift to another rift to another rift and just get around the map super quick. Viking Mountain is a mountain near Greasy Grove, and it has 12 chest spawns and 41 floor loot spawns. And the loot here is relatively condensed, so it can be looted somewhat fast. Once again, there's a rift on the side of the mountain, so once you're done looting, you can kind of rift and then maybe go towards, you know, Snobby Shores, Junk Junction, Haunted Hills, maybe go towards Greasy, maybe go towards the mine. Shifty Shafts, there we go. There's a lot of options from here that you have, and it is like a decent amount of loot that is relatively condensed. That's one of the things I like with these low-key spots, is it's not the most loot, but it's like an okay amount of loot that you can loot quick, especially if you're playing squads and then kind of dip out and third party a different area. Again, you can't just loot this probably and then just camp for the rest of the game. You need to go out and get more loot over the course of the game, most likely. Hero Mansion is on the far right edge of the map, and it has 4 chest spawns and 34 potential floor loot spawns. So you're probably like, that is terrible loot. There's no point in landing here, right? But there is a rift, and this is it's just one house, so you can loot it really quickly and then rift towards either, you know, Retail Row. There's also this little RV park in between Retail Row and the Hero Mansion that you can use for some supplementary loot if you're not happy with the amount of loot that you get, or maybe there's nobody fighting at retail. Then you could rift to that, loot that stuff up, and then now you probably should have a decent amount of loot between Hero Mansion and the RV park. It's not really the amount of loot at Hero Mansion, it's the fact that it probably should be relatively secluded. You can loot it really fast since it's just one house, and there is a rift nearby for guaranteed rotation. That's one of the things that like I really wanted with this video, was the rifts, because the loot spawn rate sucks on this map, so I wanted to find as many like okay spots with rifts that I could, that way somebody could loot it up, and then they have the option from there to either go for more loot or to just like start playing the game and start going for fights from that point forward. So I think Hero Mansion is a solid spot for that reason. It's not the most loot, but you can loot it quick and then decide from there how you want to play out the rest of the game. There's also this house on the outskirts of Pleasant. I'm not really sure what it's called. I called it a pirate camp back in the day because the season 8 season was like a pirate themed season, and they had these pirate camps around the map, and this building was turned into one of those. It has 5 chest spawns and 17 potential floor loot spawns. Again, this is all one building, so you can loot it somewhat fast, whereas like if you land at a city POI like Retail Row, there's more loot there, but it's going to take longer for you to loot it since it's all spread out, whereas this is just one house. You can loot it pretty quickly, get your 5 chests, get your 17 floor loot spawns, pray that you found some sort of shield. I believe there's even mushrooms around this building that you can use to get extra shield, and the mushrooms are really good this season because of how bad the shield rate spawn is. And then there also is a rift behind this building, which again, you can kind of take this rift, and then from there, it's really up to you. If you're happy with the amount of loot you have, you can just start playing the game. If it seems like fights are popping off at Pleasant Park and you think you're going to get decent timing on it, you can go to third party that. Or you can maybe even just rift to Haunted Hills or Junk Junction if you really wanted even more loot, because those POIs oftentimes are more secluded POIs that not as many people land on. They are on the edge of the map, but they also have their own rifts that you can kind of, so you could loot this building, rift to Haunted Hills, clean that up, maybe even rift to Junk at that point, clean that up, and then like rift from Junk to like maybe start playing the game. I think capitalizing on these rifts and chaining the rifts, going from like rift location to rift location to rift location, is going to be a huge part of the zero build meta this season, because it is, you know, much more inconvenient or much more punishing to get caught in a bad situation on this map. But if you're able to rift, not only do you get around the map faster, but you have the bird's eye view of everything. And with the third person ARs being the more prevalent ones this season, you're not really as exposed rifting. Like last season when you rifted, anybody decent with a twin mag AR was going to be a problem for you. But this season, it's really unlikely you get beamed out of the air. It can happen, especially if you're flying in a predictable way in kind of medium range, but if you're really high up or really far from someone, they're not really going to be able to do much to you. So that is the key takeaway from this video, I think. These spots are solid. I think a lot of them are decent, and a lot of them were known spots in Chapter 1 for people who like grinded wins. But I think one of the biggest kind of mindset shifts you need for the season, like I talked about earlier on in the video, is that you're probably not just going to loot an area and then be set for the game like you would in more recent chapters. You're going to need to loot that area and then evaluate from there whether or not you're set from the game. If you're not, you're going to need to go to some more like supplementary loot areas around your POI, and learning that stuff is, I feel like, part of learning the Chapter 1 map and learning the meta for this season. I personally, not the biggest fan of the loot spawn rate this season. I think that's one of the vast improvements we had in Chapter 2, because when Chapter 2 dropped, we had 100% chest spawn rate, and it just seemed like the POIs were more densely packed with loot, and that was kind of one of the things I was hoping they would change going into Chapter 1, is just kind of, you know, bump up the spawn rate again. Like, it's not exactly how it was. Some of the guns are different. We have sprinting and mantling. You might as well bump up the spawn rate of some things and make the game a little more playable, but, you know, the loot spawn rate is not it, and that just kind of changes up how you need to loot spots, and you're probably just going to have more off-spawn deaths to RNG. It is what it is. But that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys found this helpful, informative, interesting. As always, if you did, remember to give it a like, subscribe, like some more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.